Hey everybody, I'm Johnny Warrior. I am the senior instructor at Thunderbird Outdoor Adventures. Today we're going to go ahead and have a general conversation relative to Greyman Concepts. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take the discussion and focus it specifically to Greyman Concepts Overseas. If you're watching this channel, I am fairly sure that you already understand the basics of what we're talking about when we're talking about Greyman. But let's cover it just quickly without diving too much into it and bringing this out as a lengthy discussion. So the cliff note aspect is an individual's ability to blend into the demographic, the population, or the area that they're moving through, in, around, or operating through, in, or around. That is a Greyman concept, just blending in. And how do we do that? Well, we use a bunch of tools. A lot of it has to do with the way we present ourselves visually, our demeanor, the way we deal with our threat assessments, the psychological aspect of what we're doing, basically the PSYOP operations, counter social engineering, as well as some of our baseline movement, our movement over urban terrain, our integration, how we hide or carry our EDC, what the basis of our operations are or our movements are. These are all aspects that kind of intertwine with that concept and that need. So when we're dealing in the United States, it's fairly easy for us to integrate. We look similar, or the demographic has enough spread to where we'd be able to blend in, as long as we're not all tacked out or look, if we're in a business suit in an area where it's more casual, you're going to stick out. If you're going to be in an urban area and you're going to be, wearing multi-cams and stacked and racked, you're going to stand out. So balancing this, that giving us a tactical edge, allowing us to move around freely without not being noticed, and being able to keep 3 steps ahead of whatever adversary or confrontation or challenge or what may impede our movement is key when we're talking about Greyman concepts. Now, threat assessment is part of that prior planning, and then our baseline movements while we're engaged are how we initiate that. Everything else is skill set, or what we call, trade, right? Trade skills, or skills of the trade that we implement in order to give ourselves an advantage in that kind of environment. All right. If we're meandering around not being alert and we don't have a purpose in the area and there's a threat in the area, why are we in the area? But if you have a legitimate reason to be in the area and make movement through it, that needs to be the focus of where your concepts of integration are and where your baseline movement is, and how much you need to put into blending in to your environment. Now, overseas, when we talk about Greyman concepts, what we're trying to do is make ourselves less of a target for, it could be anything from, making ourselves not so much of a target for kidnapping. There's 2 ways to do that. 1, not being noticed, and 2 is making ourselves a hard target. When we're talking about making ourselves a hard target, we're stepping a little bit outside of that Greyman and allowing them to take notice that we're somebody who is completely in control of our situation and totally situationally aware, in order for them to move on and look for a softer target. So at times we're flipping some of these concepts when we're overseas. Look, the fact of the matter is, I live here in the Philippines. I do not integrate. I stand out like I'm 6'4", I'm a large man, I'm Caucasian. I stand out like a sore thumb. There's no way I'm going to integrate and just blend into the crowd. I hover over the crowd. So I need to use skill sets in order to ensure, tradecraft in order to ensure that I'm forcing myself to maintain high vigilance, a high level of alertness, that I'm fully aware of my threat levels, and I'm fully aware of my situation and surroundings. I'm using tradecraft in order to ensure that I am not going to become a target, or I present myself as a hard target. My baseline movement is with purpose, and I use tradecraft integrated in my baseline movement. So these are all things that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about, Greyman. I don't want to sit here and say it's not something that we don't need to pay attention to overseas. Contrary to that, I think there's a lot of philosophy or ideology within the philosophy that is very, very relevant to our safety and our security overseas. What I'm saying is, I don't think we need to, like in the United States, where we could take the concepts and read them like a book and apply them, using them as a 70% fix into the situation until we learn the rest of the tradecraft, learn the rest of the learning curve. We don't have that luxury here overseas. That book is a 30% fix and makes us still stand out like a sore thumb, and at times make us look like sticking out like a sore thumb, trying even harder not to stick out like a sore thumb, which brings interest to us. So being cautiously aware of our actions and our interactions is really key. I would even go as far as some of the key concepts in security are counter social engineering, making sure that we're not making ourselves susceptible to a lot of the key elements of criminal activity, like pickpocketing, theft, the scams, etc., right? And ensuring that we're not getting outside of the parameter that we set in our threat assessment, making it easier for somebody to snag us, like moving out of a populated area into an unpopulated area because it's a shortcut. Things like that could set us up for, an epic issue. So let's ensure when we're training ourselves for this type of travel security that we're open-minded, and we're not gonna, it's never close-ended. This is gonna be something that we do continuously, something that's done in training and application through the long term, and it's not a 8-hour course that we're gonna take and we've learned this concept and we're now specialists and masters of urban ninjas in the Philippines. It's not gonna happen. It's just not the way it works. Being able to make ourselves look like an aware tourist, that is something that we can do to keep the terrorists away from us, or kidnappers away from us. When an individual presents himself situationally aware and organized and not fumbling around lost and confused, that gives a adversary the view that we're not such a victim. Victimization is everything that they want. They want somebody that they're going to be able to hit, and it's going to conform to their demands immediately. That way they can gain control as quickly as possible. The minute you present yourself as they're not going to have any control over you, one of two things are going to happen. They're going to, bail on you and go to somebody else, or they're going to engage you violently and say, well, screw this, and, But in either way, situation, you're at least producing some type of control, some type of dynamic into it and ruining the plan, which is kind of the point, There's long list of don'ts and a long list of do's. What we need to do is just have an open discussion and make sure that we're getting out there and getting the training, the information, the knowledge on the fundamentals, as well as ensure we understand the concepts of the mind of the individuals that are trying to make harm on us. You know, understanding the ideologies and understanding, you know, the demographic, like here, ASG. You know, I understand that there's most likely less than 200 left in the Philippines. They're located in the southwestern parts of Mindanao. And, you know, as long as I keep myself away from that area, historically, that is the general area where the kidnappings occur. Mostly off of yachts of wealthy individuals that are sailing in the area and nabbed off the ocean. There's been a couple in the last year or so that have been nabbed out of resorts in the area. But me living in Cebu, is ASG present here? Very well probable. Is ASG going to do something active here? No, there's too much police and military activity, and the tourists here generally have a high level of alertness. There's a large expat community here, and you know that's a conversation that's openly discussed, and everybody's pretty much aware. All right. So this is really a conversation for food for thought. I hope this helps. I hope this generates a discussion. I hope we're able to help you through the discussion. Again, leave comments with questions. Email us at thunderbirdoutdoors or thunderbirdoutdoors@gmail.com, or PM us, and one of us will get back to you with an answer to questions or engage with a question and answer section in a more detailed aspect as soon as we can. All right? My name is Johnny Warrior. Until next time, remember, get outdoors, enjoy life, take a kid with you. Talk to you later.